Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome to Life Stories powered by Lifesong. And we get to do one of the coolest things in the world. We get to have conversations with extraordinary people who are not extraordinary because they're different from you and from me, but simply because they said yes to what God had created them for and called them to do. And today we get to speak to one such extraordinary couple, Matthew and Anna Bond. Guys, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation and invite us a little bit into your story.
Yeah, happy to have you, Kondo.
Man, we first met at a conference not too long ago, hosted by our mutual friends, Lifesong for Orphans. And at this conference, you guys got to share some of your story. And it was by far the most weighty and beautiful emotional moment in the weekend. And I hope you're willing to maybe share a little bit of that with our listeners here in a moment. You guys have a beautiful story when it comes to saying yes to joining God in his passion for the vulnerable child. Soon after y'all got romantically involved, if I remember correctly from your story, there was a conversation the two of you had that I have rarely heard anywhere in the church, outside of the church, involving your family. And it went something to the effect of, we want our family to grow first through adoption. If we end up having biological kids, praise God for that. But the plan is adoption. That blew my mind. And we were at a conference about vulnerable kids, orphans, adoption. And even in that space, it was surprising to hear. Matthew, why? Why was that the consideration?
Well, I have to go back a little bit before we were romantically interested. We were friends for years before anything happened between us, but one of the very first conversations that we had as acquaintances was actually about adoption. So we barely knew each other. There was no
That's
interest
amazing.
romantically whatsoever. And that conversation was because I had just friended Anna on Facebook. So this was years ago. And one of the things I'd seen her post about was adoption, but I knew she was single. So I had a lot of questions for her because I had always been interested in adoption and I shared that with her. But I was curious what she was thinking, especially about being a single person and adopting. And I wanted to get her feedback on that because at that point in my life, I wasn't sure how long I might be single. And I thought that maybe that could be something in my future as well, to be involved in adoption or foster care as a single person. And that actually led to really our friendship. By asking that
Wow.
question, then she had questions for me because she was also surprised that I was interested in adoption, period, as a single man. Because in her experience, bringing up adoption was a conversation killer for men, particularly men in their context of romantic interest. In her experience, nobody wanted to talk about that, let alone talk about that as plan A. But for us, that was always something that I think both of us, for different reasons, had been interested in since we were kids. So it was natural for us to talk about that, and then talking about that actually led our friendship to be deeper.
Wow. So Anna, as a single woman, because that's a whole other layer. It's one thing as a couple to say we want to grow our family via adoption. So rare. And yet you are taking it to a whole other level and saying, as singles, you are both already considering adoption. Anna, was marriage a prerequisite for you to adopt? In other words, were you passionate about it? I want to get married and then adopt. Or were you like, no, there was a passion to adopt almost outside of whether or not you ended up getting married?
I think it was a progression. for sure. I think that I knew I wanted to adopt from a very young age. But as I got older and I started dating, I realized like this is usually people's plan C,
Mm,
not even B. C is you exhaust your efforts and it's not coming to fruition, and therefore we adopt. And the older I got, the more I realized like this is not my plan B or C. This is my plan A. And now, how do I reconcile that with somebody who they don't have that as their plan A? Do I marry somebody who wants to exhaust their efforts having biological children and just forego what I think God has impressed upon my heart? Or do I just say, I'm going to pursue both and see what happens? And I think I got to a point where I realized that this is a God given command.
mm,
I think that in this world of adoption, a lot of people want to say that, oh, you were called to do this. And I would like to see where you have call before caring for the fatherless.
mm,
Like, it is not a call, it is a command. And as we know from scripture, commands are to be obeyed. So it was a matter of how do I obey caring for the fatherless? And if I'm a professional woman and I can support myself, plenty of people support themselves and children. And even though it's not the normative in the church, and it makes me less marketable, to be honest, as a single mom, like I need to obey. And I don't think obedience is like you teeter totter and you wait around. I think obedience is immediate. So once you have an awareness of what God's command is, there is obedience and the immediacy of obedience. So I think for me, when that became clear, then I did not wait for marriage. And I just trusted that if God was going to provide me with the means to be a single mom, then I would have the resources available. Now, whether or not I had a partner is like a totally separate issue.
When I talked with her about it, I believe she also mentioned that maybe even had a statistic, because that's my language, about how many children in foster care actually are looking to be placed in a single parent home because of their previous experiences as kids. There may be reasons why they don't want to be in the house with a man or a woman, and they would
mm.
prefer to be in a house with only one caretaker.
That's
So there is
amazing.
actually not just a need for adoption, but there's even a need for this particular situation in our foster care system, especially.
You guys, I've heard so many cool, cute stories, like going to a Christian college in particular. Um, you have the luxury of talking in ideals.
Mm.
We are going to get married and we will serve in the church and we'll take trips across the world, and we will adopt. And then the reality sets in. And it seems like more times than not, those idealistic conversations fizzle. You guys, you get married, and at some point, the conversation isn't like, do we really want to do this? The conversation is like, okay, so where is the greatest need? Seems to be a conversation that came up with the two of you. So it's not as though it fizzled, it almost escalated. We don't only want to care for the vulnerable, we want to care for the greatest need, the most vulnerable, um, which seemed to, at some level, lead you to into the special needs world. In your single days, was special needs uniquely on the radar, or did that happen a little later on?
It definitely wasn't on my radar. I don't think it
Yeah.
was on yours either. And I think that it would have been crazy to try to do our kids as single parents. I don't think
Mhm.
that would have happened or would have been crazy to do that. So I'm thankful that things did work out, that there were two of us to handle the kids that we ended up with. But special needs came to the front, as you said, because we were married 1 year and
Mm.
we got to our 1 year anniversary. Anna said, okay, this is the time when adoption agencies will start to accept our application. They won't accept your application until you've been married 1 year. So on our 1 year anniversary, then we started the paperwork. talking with our agency, yes, we did ask, what is the greatest need? And they said sibling sets, special needs, and older children. I didn't want to go down the path of older children because at the time I was fairly young myself and I wanted a bit of a gap between myself and kids. Sibling sets, we had friends that had adopted a sibling set as only the husband and wife, no other kids, and they adopted 3, and they were a little overwhelmed in terms of feeling like they were outnumbered. So we were a
Amen.
little nervous about that. That had just happened in our life, these friends. And so that left special needs. And I don't think either of us had had much experience. It definitely wasn't something we'd felt drawn to the same way we'd felt drawn to adoption for our whole life. It's not like we'd felt drawn to special needs. But there were some unusual circumstances that led us to really go down that path. And for me, it was having a dream one night where I was the child getting adopted. And if I were neurotypical, I might have a really hard time with losing my language, my friends, my food, my climate, anything that I grew up with getting ripped away from me. And I could be very upset about that or just hurt by that at some point in my life, either immediately during the transition or afterwards, wrestling with it as an older person, and thinking how hard that could be for the child. And then in my dream, I was the child getting adopted and I wasn't neurotypical. I thought maybe that transition could be easier. So that's what led us down the path for special needs, and that ended up with us getting Phoenix.
Your first memory of your son, Phoenix, Anna, is it pretty vivid, or at this point, man, we've had so much life experience, it's hard to think back?
No, it's actually very vivid. So because of COVID, Phoenix is from Bulgaria. You are supposed to go for 2 visits. The first visit is to meet the child, and the second visit would be to pick up. And so our first visit was done online. And we could see that he was starting to walk. Like he had a little, those saucers that he was able to like have some steps. And then 6 months later, so that was the online visit. 6 months later, we go pick up and we get a completely different child. One, it looked like he was a girl, so they had not like groomed him. There was no haircut, nothing. And so he had like long hair. He was literally skin and bones. He had very little movement. So we were like, this is not the same child. This child cannot even lift his head. What happened to the one that was was mobile? And so I think his biggest issue was malnourishment. So Phoenix was 2 and 8 months at the time. And when we took him back to where we were staying, we realized like there was like 8 layers of clothes on him. He was like skin and bones. He was 16 pounds, not even 17 pounds for an almost 3-year-old. And I think it was the initial shock of this little skeleton, but also how lifeless he was. Like he really just laid down and wouldn't even lift his head. So it was probably one of the scariest things because we were like, there's no life in him. And how do we feed him? How do we get him he refused to open his mouth. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't swallow. Very determined little spirit. And so
one of the things that caught my attention, it was our first adoption. It's our first time being in Bulgaria. We have no idea what any of this is like, what's normal. But in order to leave the country, we had to do some medical visits. And we did one of them with Phoenix. And even the doctor in Bulgaria, who did these visits regularly and had seen probably lots of children for the purpose of adoption, seemed taken aback at his weight. And to me, that was
a flag of some sort. Yeah,
this is not just in my head. This is remarkable, even for this context.
And let me back up, because this is for you guys. A year into marriage, you start the process. And maybe let me back up and ask a practical question. I'd love to get back to talking about Phoenix and what that was like bringing him home. But this is where Lifesong enters into the conversation for you guys in the way God provided. Anna, you talked about the means. Is that correct? That there was some kind of a matching grant made available to you? Because again, the Lifesong has this passionate belief that money should not be the reason that a child does not have a family. But that was through a friend, a former work colleague, something like that? How did that connection come about?
So it was actually a coworker of mine that referred the adoption agency. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the family that Matthew talked about, where they had gotten 3 kids all at once. They were very overwhelmed. And so they ended up going with the agency. So we went with the agency. And it's largely because the agency was used to people being transient. So they were military. And then we knew that our lives might be a little bit transient because Matthew was finishing up his PhD. He might be doing a postdoc somewhere. We didn't want that to be a barrier. And we wanted an agency that knew how to deal with multiple moves. And so at the time, there was just a mass email sent out to all the families in Eurasia saying, hey, there's this matching grant, please apply for it. And so we didn't apply because we were like, who are we going to ask? Like, it's in the Chinese culture, like, you really do not ask other people for money. Like, asking for funding is not something you do for something that is personal, even in the church. So even like asking someone to be on a fundraise for a mission trip, that's like, I don't even think we do that at our church. So anyways, Matthew said, just put it on Facebook. So we had a $4,000 matching grant. And at the time, I'm like, oh my goodness, we're going to put this on social media. He's like, then it's not personal, right? It's not a personal email to people. It's just on social media. And we were floored because it was met in 48 hours.
No way.
It was met in 48 hours, and a large portion of it was given by somebody who I have not talked to since high school. And what she said was so like piercing to me. She said, thank you for letting us be involved. We actually always wanted to adopt ourselves. That was something that we had planned for, but there were circumstances in our family that didn't allow us to. And so
She was grateful for the gift of being involved.
Yes. And so I think it changed my perceptions of what exactly asking people for funding does. It allows other people who may not ever adopt themselves be obedient.
That's so good. That is so good. It opens a door for other folks to play a part in serving the vulnerable child. And that's really, really beautiful to hear. And for those who may be listening, that may be one of those questions about, but I don't know, are we ready to foster or adopt and I hope for all of us, the answer is we're ready to do whatever God leads us to do. But in practical terms, there are so many different things you can do that don't require you to say adopt or bust, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So he comes home. How long till you start to see life and movement?
I remember the first time he smiled because he was really like just, there was no movement and no emotion. I think the first time he smiled was about month 1. And he started to gain weight pretty aggressively. Within 4 months, he gained about 10 pounds.
Wow.
So I would say with the weight gain came more energy, more mobility, and just kind of more of a desire to like explore.
Just curious to know, like, what was the relational bonding process for you guys? Because Anna, you talked about almost some of the initial shock. You guys described like there was almost a strong, stubborn resistance to being fed, or did it feel like there was a moment or a gradual process in which there was a letting down of guards and walls on maybe primarily on his end?
No,
No.
I would say immediately no. He's been a fighter his whole life,
Mhm.
and he still is a fighter.
Really?
And sometimes that's a strength when he wants to do something that gives him the strength to do it when it's hard for him. And often it's very hard to deal with when he doesn't want to do something or is afraid of doing something. Um, it's almost impossible to get him to do something. And for a lot of things, it's fine. You can just let it go. But for other things, it's really important, like nutrition. And so
Yeah.
you really do have to fight those battles, and it's quite challenging. I think one of the things that was helpful, though, to your point, is the smiling, the laughing did start.
Mm.
And then it became clear that he did have specific interests as well. Like it became clear to me that he wanted to sit up frequently. He had trouble doing it, but it was clear that he wanted to, or he
Mm.
wanted to kind of lean against a wall to kind of stand up. He had those kinds of interests. And then he was very interested in noises, making noises, that kind of, I want to say rattles, that kind of noise making. He
Hmm.
was really interested in. And that was helpful for me.
I think that it was very clear that we were not his favorite people. Like he has
Really?
a favorite person, and that's my mom. And he adores her.
And
And
you can see the difference in his posture.
oh, yes,
Wow.
he adores my mom. And there was just something about her that, like, he, I mean, he recently figured out like FaceTime. And so, like, he now, like, they clap together. They have their own little like connection. It's very adorable. And I think he definitely bonds to us, but I think there's a clear distinction that these are the people that make me do things I don't want to do. And so I think as much as he's very affectionate with us, he is bonded to us. But I think in his mind, this is the fun person and I adore her. And you guys are like the people that make me do hard things every day.
Okay, so this is so key, I think, for many of us parents. First of all, I wish we had time to talk about your mom because it's fascinating to me how oftentimes in our own journeys, someone like your mom represents almost like someone who wasn't very sure or someone who were like, I wonder how she'll respond. And then they end up being such a key part of the story. And you're like, what? Because that would be hurtful. Like, I want my child to choose me in many ways, to prefer me in every way, versus like, listen, our role is this. But for some of the joy, fun, FaceTime, he actually goes to my mom. And isn't God wise? There's something about you that doesn't seem like a sense of rejection is your primary response, at least not today. Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, I think you're absolutely spot on. You can't go into parenting thinking that you're not going to be rejected.
Mm.
Parenthood is the first time you're rejected in life, then good luck. I mean, it's like rejection every day. But also, I don't think that's my call as a parent. I am accountable to the well-being of this child, not that they like me. It's a perk if they end up liking me, but the reality is that I am loved by God, not, and I need my children to love me. But I think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that Phoenix is so expressive with his emotions. There is no, like, you don't have to try to figure out how
You don't
he's
have to
feeling.
guess.
You don't have to guess. If he's not happy, he's not happy. And so I think it's actually been somewhat refreshing in that sense that we know exactly when he's not happy. Now it's my job to figure out what is making you unhappy, right? And is that a legitimate emotion? If you are not happy because you have to walk, too bad. Suck it up. Like, you know how to walk, walk. You know, like, um, that's just part of life that we do hard things. But
I would say there was something about Phoenix that made it a little bit easier too, because yeah, it can be hard to be feeling like you're not the favorite. But I would still say we are Phoenix's favorites among other people. It's just among the mom that we're not. But what about Phoenix that made it a little bit easier to take that rejection was seeing what happened when he got what he wanted.
Mm.
And when he got what he wanted, he weighed nothing and could do nothing, which was a very clear demonstration to me that what you want isn't going to be the best for you. And there are many extreme examples of that in the case of Phoenix because he has no self awareness, no safety mechanisms. So, yes, what you want will get you in serious trouble really quickly, frequently. So, that does make it easier to feel like sometimes I'm a harsh parent. But at least to me, it's harder to feel like other people might think I'm a harsh parent than to feel like he thinks I'm a harsh parent because I know like you're going to get in trouble, serious trouble really quickly without intervention. So I don't mind being a helicopter parent and intervening. So a little bit of a backup for people who may not know our story. Phoenix, when we got him, was diagnosed with Down syndrome, and that was the only diagnosis that he had. When we got back to the States, one of the first doctors we had said he had additional diagnosis, global developmental delay, which just means he's not hitting developmental milestones. Doesn't give you much more information aside from that. So we thought, okay, hard to know what might be causing that. Maybe it's just malnutrition, lack of stimulation, being in an orphanage, trauma, who knows? But then now, 4.5 years later, we finally got an additional diagnosis of autism. And part of that journey being such a challenge was just not knowing, like, is this just Phoenix? Is Phoenix just a really hard child? He doesn't seem like other children with Down syndrome, but we don't have that many other children to compare him to. But as we continued to honestly see other kids on social media and expand the other kids that we knew with special needs, it became clear that something else was going on. And to Anna's point, his emotions are very obvious, positive and negative. And that's part of that.
Wow.
yes, with the exception of my mom,
Yeah.
like, yes, we still are his, like, probably
Yeah,
number two.
absolutely.
Right? But we only can tell that because when other people try to get our attention, he gets very upset and he doesn't want to
Yeah.
go to other people. That's how we're able to tell, like, okay,
Yeah.
or, like when we are talking or when our attention and our gaze is not on him, like he needs to like know we are near him. So there
Yeah.
is, it's not that
Yeah.
he's not bonded to us,
Yeah.
right? But I think from the very first year, I mean, not even the first month, like he smiled the most with her.
Yeah.
He looked
That's
forward to her the most, and I think to me, why wouldn't I want that? Why wouldn't I want my community
yeah.
to feel loved, right?
That's man, that is just this is my challenge with you guys. I mean, and it's proven from the first conversation we had is that I can still remember walking back to my room and I ran into you guys, and then maybe 2.5 hours later, I made it to my room. I mean, and this is part of why, like the layers of just wisdom and insight that you've gathered through lived experiences of obedience, life is profound. Like we rarely think about, I am loved by God. I have my identity in him. I am his son. I am his daughter. That is the fountain of my definition. We rarely apply that as parents. Rarely. It's one of the, again, first times I've heard a mom just out there say it. Like, if I'm loved by Jesus, I'm no longer subject to needing my kids to love me. And by the way, when I do that, I start auditioning for love and I start blending, like, is this, Matthew, as you're saying, best? And for this person, I want to give them everything they want, not, now, how do I care for you best? How do I love you most meaningfully? And the measure is not whether or not you liked it or approved of it or, preferred me to your friends. Because, man, the teenage years will come and you're like, what happened? Did we lose our, I think that is such a profound thing to share, especially coming out of the experience you guys are living in.